Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I think I'm a bit early.
Yes, as am I. It's a lot easier for me to log in earlier. So yes, ma'am, you are early. We'll get started right at 3.
Shay, may I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
The standing committees that were mentioned on today's agenda, would that be policy and planning and performance management?
Um, should read them colors. Yeah, I think that is policy and planning.
Okay,
If Colin joins, we could definitely confirm.
okay, that sounds good. I have been real active on another board and had not made any of those meetings and was wondering if I was required to choose one.
No, you're definitely able to serve on multiple boards if you have, time permitting. What you could do, depending on who's the chair of that board, is you could definitely get with them. I would try to reach out to Jonathan Crooms. He is over the policy and planning, as far as I know, and it should be a seat open, because unfortunately, as of December 1st, I have to drop off because I'm moving out of town. So there may be opportunity, for you to be able to join them if you would like to.
Oh, okay, thank you.
No worries. Yeah, well, if you see Jonathan Kroom pop up in the presentation, like, online as a participant, you could just shoot him a message, a private message, and he'll be happy to help.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Sorry to see you go.
I know this is the hardest thing that I work for Duke Energy, so we often move a lot, and unfortunately it's moving me to Hickory, North Carolina. Um but because we're covering Durham, I won't be able to serve, but I hate it. I really hate it. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm checking to see if we have quorum for today. Melissa, are you able to help me confirm if we have quorum?
Yes, we do not as of yet.
Okay, we'll just wait a few more moments, give some other people some time to hop on if you don't mind. I think some more people came in. How we're looking now, Melissa? Oh, we need 3 more. Okay. Colin, are you on the line?
Yes, ma'am.
Just quick question. I don't believe we have anything to vote on today. Do we need quorum?
I don't believe we do have anything to vote on, so you could go ahead and get started. Because
All
I
right,
think
perfect.
Russ Pierce, who's our secretary, was tied up with some unexpected things over the last few weeks, and having our meeting a week early, he wasn't able to get minutes finished and out to everyone. So that would be the only thing that we're voting on that I can think of. And he's a little under the weather, so he may not make it today as well.
Okay, no worries. And I hope he feels better. So what I'll do is go ahead and start the meeting and call it to order. It's right at 3:04 p.m. I'm Shay Kennard, the Vice President, and I'll be doing the meeting for today. Our chair has training, I believe she has like firefighter training, so she's unavailable for today, but hopefully I can try to fill her shoes. All right, so the first thing, well, Collins already discussed the approval for the minutes. So since we don't have a set to look at today, hopefully we'll be able to look at something in the December's minutes. Excuse me, December's meeting, and we'll be able to go over it then. All right, so I guess next up, that just kind of opens the floor up for public comment. If there's anyone out there that would like to make a comment at this time. Okay. All right, so our first item at hand today is coming from the Policy and Planning Quarterly Report. I do believe we have Sharita McCullers on the line, and she's going to be able to provide us some information.
Sorry about that. That was really fast. Hi, everyone.
Yeah,
Hope
we
you
moved
guys
through a
are
few things
having.
today.
Yeah, I'm wearing multiple hats as I always do in the midst of clinic and this meeting and being on Zoom, so people still come to the door. What has policy and planning been doing since September? In September, we addressed two things. We did some revisions needed to be made of our written standards. And so the committee was presented with those revisions by staff, and we moved forward and approved the revisions to our written standards. And then the second thing that we did of significance in the month of September is that we had a conversation about keeping track of our affordable housing inventory, especially as the new projects come online, and trying to figure out how do we maximize our access or opportunity to utilize those affordable housing units as they come online. We will continue to have those conversations because we did not have a rep with DHA there per se to give us an update on where things were or how soon. We did highlight some projects that we know that are happening around the city, but we as a HSAC may not have already had the opportunity to make any requests of. And so those are things that we're going to be looking at in the future. It's how do we get some prioritization or some access to those forthcoming units. In October, we discussed our prioritization process as it relates to our housing choice vouchers and our emergency housing vouchers, and revamping that process. What we have been doing in the past, we've learned through trial and error was probably not the best way to utilize our housing choice vouchers. We were putting the highest needed clients in the forefront and giving them priority for those vouchers. And in some instances, that has not always been the best decision to make, depending on the level of need folks have had. And so we have made some changes, and our coordinated entry will be piloting some adjustments to that process. The second thing we talked about in October was safety. And as you guys know, we did have a tragic event that happened, and I think Julia Gamble talked about it in our previous HSAC meeting. But as far as our discussion relates to safety, we wanted to make sure that we were using HMIS to its fullest potential, making sure that when a person has been dismissed from a sheltered situation or a house situation that is a part of our HMIS data, that we are reporting those reporting those concerns so that we are ensuring that if street outreach is going to work with that person after the fact, and notifying them of some precautions and things like that they need to take, just to try to make sure that people are safe. Not to say that homeless persons are violent, not to say that mentally ill persons are violent, not to say substance using persons are violent, but we saw from the tragedy that happened in October that it can happen. And it can happen with any person. So making sure that if we have folks who are being dismissed from our projects for behaviors that are safety concerns, making sure that the continuum is aware of that when they're working with those clients. And finally in November, I will say that we had a robust conversation as it relates to our current homeless housing numbers, and our numbers are increasing, especially in our families division. And the number is alarming. And in our last meeting, we talked about our current white flag plan as being inadequate. And there was a task for us to go forward and work on plans for the next white flag season. In our policy and planning meeting on Monday, we decided that we were going to try to do something this year. We learned that we have 38 families right now who are reporting literal homeless in our system right now. We know that with the white flag policy that many of you got on yesterday, we are only able to offer a limited number of temporary white flag slots, with only 6 units being 6 opportunities being made available for families at this point, but that's mean at capacity. And so in our future meetings, the hope is that we will dedicate the first 30 minutes of our policy and planning meeting towards those conversations and trying to come up with hopefully a better plan, or at least a community response to help us be able to expand opportunities for homeless families and singles. The other item that we discussed in our November meeting is the approval of our point in time count. That is coming up in January, and it is the responsibility of policy and planning to approve the plan that has been developed for that. And so we did approve our point in time count protocol, and I think it will be shared in today's meeting. Is that correct, Colin? And Lloyd?
I believe so.
Okay. So I want to go back to the white flag policy. And so we spent a good majority of our meeting on the white flag policy. And in addition to agreeing to work towards doing something now this year, one of the solutions we wanted to make to this was to solicit our Homeless Services Advisory Committee to draft a letter to send out to our city and county government leadership in hopes that they would send it out to our community, and as well, and look at it internally to help us come up with a solution to be able to serve people in real time right now for the winter months. And so in closing out that plan, that is the request of the Policy and Planning Committee to help us get the word out. I've already started doing my part. I've gone to my church. My hope is that my church is going to be providing funds to at least the McKinney-Vento coordinator, Ebony Ross, to be able to further their ability to be able to temporarily serve some families in our community. We just need help. We really need to do something different now. If we're in November and we're already at 38 families and 88 singles, I can't imagine where we will be in the coming months as it gets colder. So that concludes our policy and planning update.
Thank you so much for that update. Did anyone have any questions or comments for Sharita?
And Madam Vice Chair, we would, the Policy and Planning Committee would like for HSAC to hopefully decide today to move forward on the draft letter to city and county leadership.
Okay, and that draft letter, has it already been created?
It is not, I believe, Sharita, the thought was for the HSAC chair to craft a letter on behalf of the HSAC advocating for resources. If I
Right.
recall correctly, is that correct?
That's correct.
It'd be whether or not the HSAC felt in their advocacy capacity, having a letter sent to city and county leadership advocating for resources.
And the belief is also that, you know, I think in the past, we as individual members, as working groups for the HSAC, we have made appeals before in the past, and they've been somewhat successful in the moment, but we feel like our city and county leadership getting behind this effort and making the appeal will hopefully open us up to more opportunities and more options to really make this happen.
There was a question that came up in the chat, and currently there will be 20 rooms available for approximately 25 single individuals. And there will be approximately 6 spaces, approximately 6 spaces for families. Currently, there are, as of Monday, there were 88 self-identified unsheltered individuals experiencing unsheltered homelessness, waiting for a shelter bed, and 38 families experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So the gap between available resources and numbers of people stating they're unsheltered would be approximately 32 on the families and approximately, was it 60 on the families.
And what I would add to that, just for
Sorry, hold on. Sorry, I misspoke. 6 families are going to be in hotels. Things had shifted. We shifted hotels, so it changed the budget a little bit. So we have 6 families at a hotel and 3 at families moving forward. So 9 families. So we would not have a 32 person gap. There would be a 29 family gap.
And so what I will just add to that is typically our highest number on average has been around 25, 28 families. So 38 is the highest we've seen since we started tracking. And we know that landlord relations, landlords not taking vouchers anymore, people being displaced because properties are being sold. It's still happening at alarming numbers in Durham right now. Today, I have multiple clients that I'm working with. That is their reality. And so this number really could grow.
And same for us, Sharita. We have identified a few families today that are currently in their cars. So I know that family number is going to continue to grow with the numbers that we are seeing with Durham Public Schools.
And family numbers tend to ebb and flow a lot, especially as we get closer to the holidays. That number may come down, and then once we get through the holiday season, they tend to spike up again because folks don't want to put children out on the streets if they can help it right before Thanksgiving and the winter Christmas holidays.
And those numbers are just scary. All right, do we have any other questions for Sharita before we move on to the next presenter?
or Madam Vice Chair, or any possible motions that the HSAC is ready to support a a letter being drafted to city and county government. That would be the hope, that we could get a motion and an agreement to move forward on that. If the HSAC feels like that's appropriate from today's meeting, so that we can hopefully make some headway before the next policy and planning meeting, where we can get some results. We can start to try to implement additional, resources, white flag, bed options, things like that.
Okay, but the only concern I have with that is because with Helen being out, would she be responsible to write the letter, or would I be agreeing to write the letter?
It would fall between the chair, so it'd be Helen and probably staff working together to get that done.
And if I'm needed, I'll help in whatever way. But the hope was that we could move forward with the ask.
Sure. So if anyone would like to make a motion to get a letter to help support the organization, by all means, we can open up that that motion if someone wants to put it out there, and I don't have a problem with voting a yay for it, but would anyone like to make a motion?
I don't think I can make the ask and make the motion.
I'll make the motion. This is Jonathan Crooms with Durham County Veteran Services. I
Thank you,
move
Jonathan.
that the HSAC vote to direct our chair to prepare a letter asking for additional resources in support of White Flag Night.
And do I have a second?
Hi, good afternoon. This is Alicia Thompson from the VA. I second the motion made by Mr. Crooms.
Perfect. And if everyone else can head to the chat for me and vote either yes, abstain, or no, so that we can get this updated for her. Let me put my vote in as well.
And now, while everybody's voting, I would just add that Helen was very, very concerned about this in the last meeting.
She was.
She did send me a message following our policy and planning meeting, and I gave her an update, and she is willing to support the effort for us to come up with an option. So I don't think it'll be a problem for Helen with our making this request.
Yes, ma'am. All right, so it looks like the motion carries. So we will definitely make a motion and get Helen involved so she can get that letter drafted. And she may need some assistance, if you don't mind, Sharita, especially just because she was out today and didn't get to hear today's update. So if you don't mind just kind of helping her with that, that'll be great.
No problem, we'll do.
You're awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have that motion out the way. So it looks like our next topic is the ESG funding, and that is going to Lloyd to present.
Good afternoon, everyone. Look, Lloyd Schmeider with the Community Development Department. We received word on November 2nd that the State Emergency Solutions Grant Office had accepted the funding recommendations for state ESG funds in calendar year 2023. And by way of recap and providing a little information, I'll briefly mention the three organizations that were funded. In Durham, Families Moving Forward will be receiving $52,398 to support emergency shelter operations, and based on their state ESG application, they expect in total to serve 80 households with about 200 people in calendar year 2023, with a exit rate to positive housing destinations of about 85% of those households. Housing for New Hope is being funded for 2 activities. Street outreach is funded for $27,905, which would, according to their application, provide funding to serve about 12 people in 10 households in street outreach with street outreach activities, and they estimate they'll be able to exit about 80% of the households to positive housing destinations. In addition, Housing for New Hope is receiving $68,902 of state ESG funds for rapid rehousing, enabling them to serve approximately 10 people in 8 households, with 90% of the households exiting to positive housing destinations. And Open Table Ministries was approved to receive a grant of $23,771 to support their street outreach activities in Durham. And overall, they estimate that they'll serve about 230 people in 200 different households and exit about 25% of them to positive housing destinations. I would add that since that announcement on November 2nd, we also were notified that Families Moving Forward has received a second allocation of state ESG funds to support emergency shelter operations in the remaining months of calendar year 2022. They received an allocation of $51,677. The state ESG office had received some additional ESG funds from HUD. These were funds that HUD recaptured from jurisdictions that had not spent all of their previous ESG allocations. So they made those funds available to existing grantees, and Families Moving Forward did receive that second allocation in addition to the original application they received for calendar year 2022. And I'm happy to accept any questions. I believe Tammy Lawrence with Families Moving Forward and Carolyn Schultz with Open Table Ministry are on the call in the meeting as well. Not sure if we have a representative from Housing for New Hope, if there's specific questions for Housing for New Hope.
Drew's also on the call.
Very good, thank you.
All right, do we have any questions from Lloyd?
I have a question.
Sure.
Lord, will we get this like in a chart or something at some point?
It can be put into a chart in the minutes of the meeting.
Okay.
Sufficient?
Yeah, that's sufficient.
Okay.
Just so I can go back and see it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Glad you asked that. I was actually going to ask, is there somewhere for us all to view, what we're offering to what group? And, it's available for anyone, I guess, in the public to see.
We did provide a document with the funding recommendations when the HSAC approved these funding recommendations back in September of this year. So that is the original documentation.
But sometimes it can change, right, Lloyd? So like you just told us that there was some additional funding for Families Moving Forward. So that's why I was asking, could we just kind of get it in a chart?
Sure. Right, and we can ask the secretary to include that in the minutes of the meeting, and we will.
Thank you. Any other questions?
This is Jonathan Crooms, the Performance Management Chair. I just wanted to add that the COC got the maximum amount of ESG funds that we're eligible for. So That always, in my opinion, speaks well of us and is good because we're not leaving any money on the table. And I just wanted to extend my congratulations to each of the recipients and once again thank the committee that did the scoring for their good work.
Thank you, Jonathan. All right, do we have any other comments or questions? Excuse me. All
Thank you,
right,
Madam Chair.
thank you. All right, so we're gonna move right along to home ARP update. And I do believe Colin is gonna provide that update for us.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to give you an update. We've talked about home ARP forever ago, it seems, because it is a one-time source of funding. And the funds have an expiration date. HUD in the last roughly 2 weeks imposed a new deadline on us that we were not anticipating, that kind of came up saying that we have to submit our plan to HUD no later than March 31st, 2022. We were under the impression that there was no deadline on this, which it originally was no deadline for plans to be submitted, as long as funds were expended before the end of the deadline. So we were sort of on a different timeline, but we've had to shift that timeline. With that being said, I wanted to put together just a very brief presentation to share with you so that we can all get our heads wrapped around what the home ARP funds are for and what they can and can't be used for, because our December meeting will need to have a little bit more of an in-depth conversation. So between now and December, you'll be getting information from us at the city that will assist in the decision-making process and soliciting feedback. So this is just a very high level kind of a grounding, if you will, of what it is that we need to do. And I'm going to share my screen and kind of walk you through some of this, and I'll be happy to entertain some, any questions that come up as we go or at the end of this. So home ARP funds are roughly $4 million. It's one-time funding, and it can only be used to assist specific qualified populations. And we'll talk about those populations in a moment. The funds must be fully spent by September 30th, 2030. Now keep that date in mind, because some of these certain eligible activities may not work well because of that deadline. And that's going to be something that will be kept in mind as we have those discussions. As I shared a moment ago, the plan on how we're using these funds must be submitted to HUD no later than March 31st, 2023. And this is this home ARP plan follows the same path as a substantial amendment to our annual action plan. For those who are aware of the annual action plans that we submit to HUD annually, there is a process, public hearings and things like that. So we will be following that path, and it'll be a public hearing as part of this process. So qualifying populations. These funds are really, really, really targeted for homeless, households experiencing homelessness. So, the first qualifying population, households experiencing homelessness, at risk of homelessness, and households fleeing or attempting to flee intimate partner violence. Otherwise, people may know it as domestic violence. Then there's other populations that don't fall within these categories. And then there's a whole bunch of very specific criteria that group must meet within the rules. And then the last category, last qualifying population, are veterans who don't meet any of these other three categories. Keep in mind, these are just the very high level qualifying populations. Under each one of these are very specific, here are the criteria to meet this definition. But I wanted to sort of get you focused on who we are able to use these funds to assist. Then we're going to look at these home funds can only be used for certain eligible activities. So these eligible activities are supportive services, acquisition and development of non-congregate shelters, tenant-based rental assistance. This is one of those that, if the community is, well, we want to do this, keep in mind that tenant-based rental assistance would go away September 30th, 2030, and anybody receiving those vouchers would no longer have any subsidy. Development of affordable rental housing, nonprofit operating, which is operating costs to run certain programs with some very specific limitations on what you can and can't do. And the nonprofit capacity building would be part of, essentially hiring additional staff to expand and take on some new things, and administration and planning. And some of these funds have already been committed to the administration and planning of this. So that's why we'll share some of that as we get into discussions and some of the data as we look at this. Then the home ARP rules call out specific groups that at a very minimum must be consulted with. So since most of these groups are members of the HSAC and or the of the continuum of care, the plan would be to use the December HSAC meeting, which is a full COC meeting, to consult and get input from as many of these groups as possible. So I will ask if you know people who are in the public-private groups dealing with fair housing, civil rights, or persons with disabilities, please make sure to shoot me an email with contact information, so we can make sure we reach out to them and make sure that they're invited to the meeting or have or able to share thoughts with us about about the programs that we could or couldn't do. So we're specifically be talking to domestic violence service providers, veterans groups, housing authority. Then our next step is our December HSAC meeting. We will use this to solicit some input, consult, and get some data. Before this December meeting, we will email out some data because HUD fortunately has a template that we're able to use and can help us pinpoint some data points that we can send out to help figure out some of the gaps, to help us better identify, where and how could we meet some of these needs in the community. And then obviously, as I said before, there'll be a public hearing prior to the submission to HUD. So there will be additional places for input throughout the process. But before we get too far down the road, we want to make sure that we're having the conversations with all the relevant stakeholders to ensure that we get the best information possible. Any questions?
Colin, you didn't tell us what it can't be used for. You think that we would possibly come up with as a solution. What is that thing that it can't be used for? Is there anything?
I mean, you've got to stick within those eligible activities. I don't know if there's anything. I'm trying to think. You could not use it for a home ownership program, for instance. Like that's something that doesn't seem to fit based on what I see off the top of my head. I don't think that's an eligible one. And you can't use these funds to serve anybody outside those qualifying populations.
So is there any, so for example, one that is coming to mind for me in some of the scenarios that I've had people who were at imminent risk of becoming homeless, but they were becoming homeless due to the fact that they couldn't pay their property tax.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were losing their house because it was going into whatever that status is, whether the city or the county can sell it off. There's no resource that we have in our community right now who that can pay for that. So could those funds be used to prevent a homeowner from becoming homeless? Is my question.
I hear what you're saying. So basically to be able to step in and pay delinquent property taxes to avoid foreclosure and
Right, and loss of property and becoming homeless.
I would have to go dig into it. Off the top of my head, I'm going to say no, but I don't, let me look in. I'm not sure that would fall into the at risk of homelessness category.
Right.
Not sure that paying delinquent property taxes with federal funds is going to be an eligible expense. Generally speaking, that's a big no-no with using tax dollars to pay taxes. That's essentially what you would be doing is using taxes to pay taxes.
All right.
But I will look at it, and I'll send you the regulations as well, so you can look in it and see if you read them differently.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm. Other thoughts, questions, concerns?
One of my questions was, have we used the funding at this point? But I believe you kind of answered that a little bit. I was going to ask if we have used the funding, what are some of the examples that it has actually gone towards so far?
That's a great question, Shay. The funding has not been used at this point, as we are not able to even access the funding until we get this substantial amendment completed.
Okay.
The only thing that we have been able to request ahead of time is a small percentage of the admin funds to help cover, some of those costs of writing the plan and doing planning activities and things like that. But it's a pretty de minimis amount that would have been spent from that.
Okay. And are these funds able to go towards, maybe the city or the county having a center built that can house multiple people, especially during the white flag times? Is there something that we can do? I know that there's a big building that it was like an old Kroger or something, if you take 125,000 and get a contractor to come in there and see what we could do with it. Are those some of the possible avenues that we can take? Because I think that having control over our own facility will allow us to, of course, put people on the program to where they're not, staying extendedly, but also to just have extra available room and space for times like we're facing now, which is the white flag. So would that be something that these funds can go towards?
Yes and no. So yes, you could use it for non-congregate shelter, using the analogy it used, a big box store would have to be retrofitted to create non-congregate shelter space based on the reading of this. You wouldn't necessarily be able to just, put cots in there and make it a congregate shelter.
Okay.
That could be an option. The other piece with that is if you're going to be doing a construction project, these are funds that would have to go through a procurement process. So you'd be on a pretty tight timeline that these funds have to be fully expended by September 30th, 2030. By the time we have a grant agreement back from HUD, which would be after March 31st of 2023, then an RFP would have to be put out. $4 million is a lot of money, except for when you get into construction, where $4 million, depending on what you're trying to do, may not go very far. So we may need to be looking at, pulling from other funding sources to, depending on what it is. If you were doing a affordable rental development, for instance, $4 million isn't going to get you too many units.
I think there's some negotiation that can be done around that, being as though that we're opening it up for the community. I think that, maybe chasing down some of the construction companies that are here and just letting them know what we're facing, I'm sure we'll run into someone that's happy to cut us a discount on, the type of work that they're doing. I mean, I definitely understand what you're saying. The $4 million definitely will go quick. But if you get a standalone building that's already up and you're not doing too much to it to fix, I kind of think that it's possible. You can do things like Habitat for Humanity. They can, kind of kick in and help us figure out what we could do to get some things going. I'm not sure, but I didn't know if that would suffice for it. But thank you for answering my question. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Did we have any other questions?
I'm just curious, Colin, the public input process is, pretty rigorous based on what, HUD is asking for. And once, the city comes up with an allocation plan, my understanding is it has to go to HUD for approval before, you can start spending it where you want to spend it. I absolutely suspect that some themes will kind of arise as you talk to different groups. But I mean, I'm just curious if you have any sense of how you're going to assimilate so much feedback. Is it just going to be counting up these comments in terms of, this is for, new affordable units, this is for new shelter capacity, this is for white flag? Or do you have any sense of that right now? Because it seems like it could be overwhelming for y'all.
It will be a lot of, you're right, Ryan, there's a lot of data. Given that we're looking at a very, we're looking at a small geographic area. We're not trying to do this for, the state of the country. We're trying to look at this for just Durham. And I suspect when we start pulling the PIT data, the housing inventory count data, we'll start seeing some like true gaps, and sort of, it may help us narrow, we got essentially 5 qualifying populations. We may quickly say, you know what, here's our biggest, maybe households experiencing homelessness there's more people in that category than we have in the HUD definition of at risk of homelessness. So that may knock one population out just on the data side. Then it's like, okay, well, and I'm just going through a hypothetical model in my head. So please don't take this as this is where we're going. I'm just using, sort of a logical model going through this. It's like looking at the data, hopefully we'll be able to see a trend of, oh, here's a gap. Now, what of these eligible activities would best meet that gap? Is it doing that tenant-based rental assistance for the next 6 years? Okay, then what are we going to do with the households that have that tenant-based rental assistance when it's gone in 2030? Is the expectation they support themselves, or are we setting up on a bridge to returning to homelessness if they can't increase their income enough to cover market rate from 6 years from now? So that some of those things may sort of weed themselves out as it's a great idea, but it might only be for a very short, a very small group of people. And, if right now the big what we're hearing right now is a white flag need. And if we look at white flag and just use that as an example, okay, well, if we've got this many people that are experiencing unsheltered homelessness, one of the eligible expenses is affordable rental housing. Well, does it make more sense to put the money into affordable rental housing, or does it make more sense to put it into a non-congregate shelter that could be used for white flag? And if you're going to do this only for white flag, then, well, why not? Does it make sense just do we need another shelter year round that sort of does that drop in? It's there, it's available for a variety of things. And it's not just white flag, but it's also the summer wind and rainstorms that come through and the high heat. And so I don't know the answers to it. I'm thinking that as we sift through the data, some data themes will clearly say, here's the biggest number. And then when we look at that number and look at what those eligible criteria are, we may be able to whittle out, here are the ones that we definitely are just not able to do, or we're not going to be able to do for a long enough period of time. Because the construction projects have to be used in those however you choose to do it for a period of affordability, 10, 15, 20 years sometimes. So it's making sure that we use it wisely. And to your point, yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of listening to what we hear and trying to synthesize the themes. And we'll document, here, especially from those groups that we have to consult with. DHA says this is what we're hearing, and domestic violence providers are saying this is what we want. So we'll be sort of counting, and while people may not be using the same words, trying to find that overarching theme that we will hopefully land on something. But looking at it, I suspect it'll probably come pretty clear pretty quickly, based on data and the limited. It's not like you can use this to go out and build a skyscraper. There's not enough money in there to go build 100-story building that will do everything under the sun. So we have to be relatively reasonable with what's reasonable in the time period we have as well. Yeah, Sharita, you're absolutely right. Is whatever's built, if you use this money for construction or acquisition, there's also the ongoing, I always say the building is the cheap part. You might put $10 million into a building to build it, but it may cost you $1 million a year or $2 million a year to operate it for the next 20 years. So, you got the 10 million up front and 2 million a year for the next 10 or 20 years. That adds up pretty quickly. So there's a lot of things to think through. Is how do we use the money? What do we do with it? How do we make it sustainable? And make sure that we've got service providers, if service providers are going to be required to be part of the projects, to make it a feasible thing. And that's what we have to ultimately come down to is, all right, we're not necessarily going to say, oh, agency X is going to do ABC. It's really coming up with conceptually, what is it that we as a city are going to spend our money on, then allow organizations to bring ideas that meet that need and fall within that scope, and then figure out the details, figuring out those partnerships. Does that help?
It definitely helps me. So thanks you.
It's so quiet today.
It is. Okay, and I see we have some good points going on in the chat as well. Alicia, I love your example with Cisco wanting to convert containers for homeless showers. But we need them to fund permanent housing and emergency housing. A lot of people are taking those crates, those big trailers, and they are converting them into tiny homes and things like that. But again, that comes with, like Colin said, utilizing a lot of money in construction and things like that. So yeah, it definitely sounds like some thought needs to go into this process. Even though we're late in the game at the last minute, not willingly, but we're late in the game, being able to come up with a few things before March 31st. But maybe, Colin, you might want to see if there's any committees that you can form out of this that want to put their ideas together so that it's not so overwhelming for you all once you're thinking through that process.
Yeah, I mean, right now we've got a lot of the data pulled. We're just trying to put it into a format so that we can email it out with and fill in some of the missing pieces that we're still trying to, just synthesize so that we can send out, here's what we're seeing at this point. And then obviously when we send it out, when we send this out to the HSAC, you don't need to hold your thoughts until December. If you see things or have questions, please email back, let us know what you're thinking as we go through the process, because you may see something that we're missing and it'll help make the December presentation, and discussion a little bit better, because, hey, here was something, and great idea, but it's not viable and we can share it. Or, hey, this is a great idea, totally viable, and this is how it might work. So we want to make sure we collect input as we go through the process. So as you think of things, please email us, share your thoughts. Don't hesitate, don't hold back. There's no such thing as a bad idea or a bad question.
All right, thank you, Colin. Did we have any other comments or suggestions surrounding this update at this time? Moving right along. Okay, next thing on our agenda is a call for new standing committee members. So at this time, we're kind of looking for, of course, any committee members who are wanting to get their hands dirty on the different committees that we do offer. As of December 1st, I will be dropping off as vice president, as well as removing myself from the HSAC policy and planning meeting with Jonathan Crooms, excuse me. So we will have some open slots available for people to kind of come in and volunteer. So if there's anyone that is willing to, get their hands dirty and jump in some new membership, please just email the COC. We do have the involvement interest form that was added to the chat. And that pretty much is our update. So I'll be relocating to Hickory, North Carolina. And as my understanding, I won't be able to participate because we focus on, Durham County development. So my parents are here, so I'll still be coming back, but unfortunately, I just won't be able to serve. And I hate that because I feel like we're just about to get things like, rolling, and it's been great being on the board. So please fill out the interest form. We are happy to have you. We're looking for people who could be committed. We're also looking for people who are not afraid to voice their opinions, because we want, we want to be able to help out our community. When we walk away from this, what did we get out of it? Did you help someone with your decisions or your thought process, or, the volunteerism that you're putting in? That's the point. So it will be awesome if we can get people to get more engaged. If you have family, friends, anyone that is wanting to get their hands dirty, let us know. And I think that kind of ran into the COC for the liaison too.
I will say thank you, Shay, just on behalf of the HSAC. Yeah, thank you. And on behalf of the city, thank you for your commitment to your work on the HSAC and tireless dedication, because not only are you the vice chair of the HSAC, you're also and have been on the performance management committee and the secretary of that committee, and you're just involved in so much of what we do. You're going to be missed, and we appreciate all that you've done for us, and hope you'll come back and visit and join meetings whenever you're able to. They are public meetings. So even though you might not be an HSAC member, you're always welcome in the family.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So I can still join the meetings. Okay, good to know.
Yeah, you can
Yay.
absolutely be participating in the meetings and listen. You just can't be an official HSAC member anymore, but you can still
Got it.
love and care about the community and listen in and stay connected if you wish.
All right, that makes me feel a lot better. Thank you for that. All right, so did we have any announcements from any chairs or COC members that we wanted to put on the board? And thank you to everyone that's sending me messages. Thank you so much.
Lloyd's got his hand up, Madam Chair.
Okay, Lloyd, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Go ahead, Lloyd.
That's all right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe it may be on the agenda, but wanted to let the membership and those on the call know that we are working to pull together the annual Homeless Memorial Day service. for the evening of December 21st. We'll have another opportunity at the December meeting to announce it, but I've done some preliminary work in the HMIS, and the HMIS is reporting that since last year, actually, I think we had one person actually die on December 20th of last year that I'm not sure was included in the last year's service, but since that service, including that person, we've had at least 15 people as recorded in the HMIS who either died homeless or died in permanent housing, but had recently been homeless in the Durham community. And from what I can tell, based on their dates of birth, the oldest person was born in 1948, so would be like 74. The youngest person on this list that I've assembled so far, and I've not completed this, but have a person that was born on November 29th of 1986, and that's actually the person that died on December 20th of 21, and so they died at the age of 35. So a lot of people that I look at the list are in my age group and younger as well. So invite members to come and remember these individuals that has died, as well as we can again as a community remember the nurse practitioner who was tragically killed in October that was referenced earlier in Ms. McCullough's report.
Laura, will they be doing their normal request for names like they normally do, or no?
I am preparing to get that out, and would ask if you do have additional names, get them to me by December 9th. I'll be working with the new director at Durham Congregations in Action, and I've made contact with her. Some of you know her. Brianna Van Belsen is the new director, and she'll be working to organize the service and pull clergy and religious leaders together to participate in that service. We haven't finalized a location or a time as yet, so that information will be forthcoming as the date approaches.
Thank you. I'll get my names to you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Did we have any other updates that we need to announce today?
Madam Chair, this is Alicia Thompson. Hey, Lloyd, I have someone that's going to get you some names as well.
Very good.
And I can, Madam Chair, I can put my announcement in the chat. The VA will be hosting a Thanksgiving dinner for veterans at the East Trinity Avenue location on November the 26th. So if folks are willing and able to come out and give back on that date, I know for me, it's a family tradition that we take the little ones out and they give back on Thanksgiving. So if you and any of your family and friends are interested in coming out and supporting our veterans and rolling up some sleeves, please feel free, and the details are in the chat. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Yes, please put that in the chat. I'll be happy to share that with my family and friends. So thank you so much for that. Any more updates? Announcements? Okay. All right. Well, we are at the end of our agenda today. So a few reminders, the next HSAC meeting is going to be held on December the 14th, which is the third Wednesday. So HSAC members are invited to join the policy and planning and performance management committees. We're also accepting applications, I guess, for another COC liaison for policy and planning. If you are interested, just please send us an email at durhamopeningdoors@durhamnc.gov. That way we can ensure that we get your information in and we can start to get you vetted there. And then also we have a county appointed HSAC available seats. So there are 2 county appointed HSAC seats available to the public. One county appointed seat is immediate vacancy for formerly homeless individual. It was vacated by Michael Best. And then the other county appointed seat is corporate private sector. It's an expired term by Dr. Angelo Birch, but please, if you need to have this link and you want to sign up for it, I'll put it in the chat here for us. And then last but not least, we have Homeless Memorial Day service on December the 21st. So make sure, you mark your calendars down and I'm sure we'll bring it up again in the December's meeting, but hopefully everyone can get engaged on that event as well. And then if you want to check the chat, I just added the county appointed HSAC seats link that's available in the event that you would like to fill that out. At this point, it's round table. We do have some time to give back, probably about 25 minutes, but if we want to use this time to discuss and just chat about a few things, by all means we can. If not, we would just need someone to make a motion to adjourn today.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair. This is Vega Sweps, and I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead and adjourn if there aren't any other discussions or topics that we need to address.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Vega. And I don't think we need a second. Everybody's going to agree with that. So I guess we get about 24 minutes back. By all means, guys, you have a wonderful day. If you have any questions, just feel free to reach out. And thank you again for allowing me to use some of my time here with you all. Have a great day.